Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Emmanuel Champon, and I am the Ellen Gurney Professor of History and of African and African American Studies. I'm also the Faculty Director for the Center for African Studies. But I also serve as the Minister for Worship and Formation for Memorial Church at Harvard. It is my privilege and pleasure this afternoon to welcome you to our Du Bois Awards ceremony and to offer an opening prayer. On behalf of President Bacow, Glenn Hutchins, and Henry Louis Gates, Jr., it is my honor to welcome the 2019 Du Bois medalists. May we be in a spirit of prayer. Lord God, thank you for this day and for the distinguished medalists we have in our midst for this year's Du Bois Medals Award ceremony. Hosea 4 says that without vision, without knowledge, your people perish. Perhaps nobody understood this better than W.E.B. Du Bois, who dedicated his life to outlining a vision that would guide the emancipation and empowerment of his people, a vision sufficiently expansive to embrace Africa and its diaspora. This afternoon we pray that God's Spirit will animate our presentations, readings, reflections, and music, and make this ceremony special in ways that exceed anything we could have imagined or planned. That we will all leave this theater keenly aware that we have been part of something extraordinary. In your name we have prayed. Amen.
Emmanuel Champong, first African, come up through the ranks, history of Harvard, and gain tenure. Give it up for that brother, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Henry Louis Gates, Jr. And it's my pleasure, on behalf of the 29th president of Harvard University, Lawrence Bacow, and on behalf of the chairman of the advisory board of the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research, Glenn Hutchins, to welcome you to this, the 7th annual Hutchins Center Honors, where we take enormous pride in awarding the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal to 7 individuals for their outstanding contributions to Black history and Black culture. Each is a paragon of what young people today refer to as Black excellence. Let's give it up for these excellent 7 medalists. This is not just any stage. We take our place on the very same stage where W.E.B. Du Bois addressed his graduating class in 1890. Can you imagine that? The young Du Bois, first Black man in history to address a graduating class from Harvard. And he rocked it too. Next day, the New York Times said, "Negro speaks at commencement." Du Bois later wrote, "They were amazed he didn't fall down." That was 5 years before he became the very first African American to earn a PhD in the history of Harvard University. Everything that we are and everything that we hope to achieve traces back to the genius of William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, to his scholarship, to his political courage, and not least, to his vision for studying the Black world throughout the diaspora and uniting it and defending it in a common cause. Before we recognize this year's outstanding class of medalists, let me say a few words about where we find ourselves at this moment, at this university, in this phase of a much longer struggle to bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice. My parents' names were Pauline Coleman and Henry Gates, but I want to boldly declare in front of everyone assembled at Sanders Theater today that I am the proud child of affirmative action. I wouldn't be standing here today, nor would I have had any of the experiences and opportunities that I've enjoyed in my life since I became a college student and since I became a professor here at Harvard 29 years ago. Had I not been able to walk through the doors that affirmative action opened for me in September 1969, as it did for other people of color and the women of our generation gathered here this afternoon, and for the several generations of students at historically white colleges and universities that followed ours. For too long, people of color and women of all colors in this country were denied entrance into places such as this. But for the last 50 years, affirmative action has begun to right those cruel, suffocating wrongs that our parents and our grandparents endured daily. As the living, breathing, thriving children of affirmative action, therefore, history calls on us to be full-throated in our defense of this monumentally transformative program. So we must today profess joy, and perhaps these days profess astonishment in celebrating the wise federal judge Allison Burroughs, who just a few weeks ago ruled in favor of this university in the very case brought by a group calling itself Students for Fair Admissions in the U.S. District Court here in Boston. Judge Burroughs found that Harvard's admission system, while not perfect, is well-intentioned and, importantly, is based on a holistic review of every applicant's case with the goal of creating a diverse class, a goal worth striving for because diversity benefits each student and benefits the entire community by representing both the shape and the color of the world in which we live and into which our students will graduate. President Bakau's reaction to the decision was clear in its conviction and clear in its commitment. Today, he said, we reaffirm the importance of the diversity and everything it represents to the world. Give it up to the judge and give it up to the president. Ladies and gentlemen, Harvard's unflinching courage in defending this noble educational value in Donald Trump's America, at a time when the United States Supreme Court is pressuring colleges and universities to tailor their affirmative action programs ever more narrowly, helped win the day. Now, while I don't think anyone can be confident about what will happen to affirmative action cases on appeal to our highest court, let us not miss the opportunity to thank our president, Lawrence Bacow, and our former president, Drew Faust, for their bold defense of affirmative action and their determination to keep open the doors of privilege that once were closed to all but a tiny minority. Give it up for Bacow and Faust one more time. We reflect on this legal victory and all that's at stake in this struggle as we honor those here at Harvard who continue to defend the role of the university in our resplendently multicultural society as a place of quote-unquote inclusion and belonging, as my colleague, University Professor Danielle Allen, so beautifully has phrased it, as a safe harbor of racial, ethnic, gender, sexual identity, and religious difference. Recalling events at this university surrounding immigration in the last few weeks, I'm mindful of a verse from the book of Psalms. Let all who take refuge in you be glad. Let them ever sing for joy, and may you shelter them. Ladies and gentlemen, doors and borders have much in common. Both must be kept open to allow for the free flow of talent, education, and ideas. It is a distinct honor to be a member of an academic community whose leaders stand up and pull the full weight of Harvard University behind affirmative action, behind academic freedom, and ensuring Harvard's place as a safe space for those scholars and students most at risk. And here I have to pause to recognize the work of my brilliant colleague in the English department, probably the top Shakespearean scholar in the world, University Professor Stephen Greenblatt, and the equally brilliant Jacqueline Baba, who've dedicated themselves not only to the study of, but also the protection of citizenship rights and refugee rights the world over. And to Jane Unruh, one of the most indefatigable administrators that I've ever met. Together they run what we at Harvard call the Scholars at Risk program, part of an international program that provides sanctuary to dozens of artists, writers, and other intellectuals who are at risk in their home countries, sometimes because of the content of their work, but often just because of their ethnicity, because of their sexuality, because of their religion, their gender, their political opinions. Each one of us here should be proud to be part of an institution that views intellectual freedom as inextricably bound to the exercise of our rights as citizens of this great country and as citizens of the world. Let us salute these colleagues and salute our administration for their unyielding support of the Scholars at Risk program, for their vigilance, and for the countless other protections that Harvard affords to its students and faculty from around the world. In many ways, the opening of the doors of learning is the story of my generation, a generation that came of age in the 50s and the 60s, when the color line in America was not only a fact of life, but still the law of the land. A generation that went to college as the first beneficiaries of affirmative action programs, targeting historical discrimination, and that integrated historically white institutions such as Harvard in significant numbers. A generation that reached unimaginable heights, from the Oval Office in the White House to Harvard's 4 brilliant black female deans today, the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, Claudine Gay, Tomiko Brown-Nagin, Dean of the Radcliffe Institute of Advanced Study, Bridget Long, Dean of the Graduate School of Education, and Michelle Williams, Dean of the T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Give it up for the four. When I came here 29 years ago, Larry, if anybody said we have 4 black female deans, they would have checked you into the mental institution. A generation that could tell our children and our grandchildren that they can aspire to be whatever they wish to be, and actually believe it. It takes leaders to sustain that belief over generations, and we're blessed to have such heroes here in our midst. In particular, I want to single out a few. I want to thank David Evans. David Evans, who in his role as Senior Admissions Officer, has now, get ready for this, this brother has personally overseen the admission of almost 6,000 black students to Harvard College since the 50 years. Including Cornell West. On behalf of Harvard's Black alumni who were admitted because of you, but also on behalf of all of us, Dave, I want to thank you. You who took a one-year leave of absence from a high-paying job as an engineer at IBM in order to help Harvard find qualified black students, and who has remained on leave of absence from IBM for the last 50 years. That surely is a record. I want to thank David Evans for his keen foresight, for his steady commitment, and his selfless sacrifice. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for David Evans. We also have with us today Preston N. Williams, the first African American to be granted tenure at the Harvard Divinity School in 1971, and who answered the call of university president Derek Bach when in 1975 he agreed to serve as the first director of the W.E.B. Du Bois Institute. Professor Williams was the perfect choice to launch the Du Bois Institute, to shepherd its first fellows, and build a constituency for its mission to support and disseminate research in African and African American studies. I'm deeply honored to salute him today. Please let's give it up for Preston N. Williams. Another pioneer is with us this afternoon, and his name is Orlando Patterson. Orlando Patterson is one of the world's foremost historical and cultural sociologists, and he was a member of the original advisory board of the Du Bois Institute, not long after arriving at Harvard to teach in 1970, when he became the first black tenured professor of sociology in the history of this university, and later the first black scholar to win the National Book Award in nonfiction. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Orlando Patterson. We recently commemorated the career and retirement of our colleague, William Julius Wilson, about whom Glenn Hutchins will have a bit more to say in a minute. But it's on your shoulders, David, Preston, Orlando, and Bill, that we stand, and we are truly in your debt for your sacrifices. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I also want to take a moment to recognize the Harvard Lion, Martin Kilson, who passed away earlier this year. 50 years ago this year, he became the first African-American tenured professor in any field in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. He also served as a member of the Recipients Committee, which studied the question of establishing black studies at Harvard at a time of great upheaval in the country and on this campus. And a few years later, served as a member of the advisory board that gave birth to the Du Bois Institute, and in fact, he was chair of the search committee that ended up hiring me. Martin Kilson attended historically black Lincoln University, where he actually saw W.E.B. Du Bois address the student body, and he heeded the great man's call, going on to earn both his master's degree and his PhD here at Harvard, where he quickly established himself as a beloved teacher, mentor, and leading researcher on politics and government. A mark of the greatness of any scholar is her or his legacy as measured through their students. What greater legacy could any professor have than to have served as the mentor of and the inspiration for one of the most distinguished members of the Harvard College alumni and one of the most dazzlingly brilliant teachers and scholars on our faculty today, the inimitable Cornel West. the intellectual godson of Martin Kilson. Martin's wife, a brilliant scholar in her own right, Marion Kilson, is here today. Dear Marion, would you please stand and accept our thanks for all that you and Martin did to get us where we are today. I'm looking back this afternoon because we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Department of African and African American Studies this year. And we're looking toward the 45th anniversary of the Du Bois Institute in 2020. Inspired by the dreams of student activists on campus in the late 1960s, the Du Bois Institute has housed more than 500 scholars. The fellows who are with us in the audience today are the latest in a line of the most distinguished scholars and leaders in the field. For example, the Institute's inaugural class in 1975 included my dear friend and the pioneering scholar, Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham, the first black female historian to gain tenure in the history of Harvard and the chair of the history department today. Stand up, Evelyn. Her class of fellows also included the Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer Jeffrey Stewart, who wrote a biography of Alain Locke, first black Rhodes Scholar, and the first black man to earn a PhD in philosophy from Harvard. And Valerie Smith, currently the president of Swarthmore College. Kimberly Benston, the president of Haverford College right now, and my classmate at Yale, is a fellow with us this year. I would like to thank for the 14 current and all former Du Bois Institute fellows who raised the bar high for research in the fields of African, Afro-Latin American, and African American studies to stand up, please. There they are. Thank you. In 2013, the Du Bois Institute experienced a change that allowed it to grow far more than it ever possibly could have since its inception, to sponsor more research and to launch programming touching every aspect of the African diaspora, including the Caribbean and Latin America, the whole of the African continent, and Black America. The Hutchins Center for African and African American Research was founded that year because of the generosity of two people who were dear to me and among my closest and most trusted friends. Their passion for and deep understanding of our mission fueled their commitment to our field in the form of the largest donation ever given in the history of the field of African and African American studies. I'm speaking, of course, of Glenn and Debbie Hutchins. To give you a good visual of how far their generosity has allowed us to come, 45 years ago, the Du Bois Institute occupied a windowless basement in the Harvard Yard dorm. Now the Hutchins Center, which is both a concept and a building, occupies 23,000 square feet in the heart of Harvard Square, including an art gallery and a facade designed by the renowned architect Sir David Adjaye, the same genius who designed the magnificent National Museum of African American History and Culture, conceived and executed by a person we are celebrating this afternoon, Dr. Lonnie Bunch. And funded so generously by an array of donors, most notably Du Bois medalist Oprah Winfrey, and a man called Robert Frederick Smith, whom we're so pleased to be honoring this afternoon. In Harvard's context, Glenn and Debbie Hutchins' generosity has ensured that African, Afro-Latin American, and African American research will always have a home at Harvard 1,000 years from now, putting a very public face on Harvard's own commitment to our field. Ladies and gentlemen, pioneers built the Du Bois Institute. The Hutchins family has sustained it. Give it up one more time for Glenn and Debbie Hutchins, please. What is history if not building on opportunity and fighting for more opportunity? Opportunities present themselves in different ways, of course. In the year 1860, according to the federal census, only 10% of the 4.4 million members of the African American community were free. Fully 90% of our African American ancestors were forced to live in chains. But whether free or enslaved, before America's costliest war that would finally put an end to the institution of slavery at the cost of 750,000 lives, African Americans as a people continued to face apartheid conditions for a century following the Civil War, leading Dr. King to liken race relations in America to a check marked insufficient funds in his historic I Have a Dream speech. Affirmative action, born in the late 60s out of the struggle of the civil rights movement, only lasted a few short years before attempts to roll it back began. And that effort, ladies and gentlemen, continues. We owe it to our children and to our grandchildren, but also to our ancestors who fought so long and so hard to make possible the achievements that we celebrate today, to remain vigilant and to crush any manifestation of white supremacist hatred, whether that be anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, gender discrimination, misogyny, or anti-black racism, whenever and wherever they rear their ugly heads. In closing, I want to turn our attention to a giant who passed just last week, a man I admired enormously, Congressman Elijah Cummings of Baltimore, referred to as the North Star and as our moral compass. Representative Cummings was a model public servant and a towering figure in our nation's political life. He told a story a few years ago on his being sworn into the United States Congress that's been retold a lot over the past week, but I think it's worth repeating this afternoon. After the swearing in, Elijah noticed that his father had tears in his eyes. His father didn't cry, at least not in front of him, and Elijah figured that he was overcome by the emotion of the occasion, which would be natural. No, it wasn't it exactly his father responded to him. Rather, he said, I kept looking at your hand, and I realized that the same blood that runs in your hand runs in mine. He went on looking around the Capitol building, which he had never visited before. Isn't this the place they used to call us slaves? He asked his son. And Elijah said, yes, sir. Isn't this the place where they used to call us 3/5 of a man? And Elijah said, yes, sir. Isn't this the place where they used to call us chattel? Yes, sir. When I think about you being sworn in, his father said, now I see what I could have been if I had only had the opportunity. If I had had an opportunity. We are here this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, to celebrate not only achievement, but also opportunity. Our medalists, stars in the fields of art, literature, music, business, philanthropy, and even a queen. Our medalists have made the most of their opportunities. Our charge to the young people in the audience this afternoon is that you make the most of yours and let nothing stand in your way. My friends, please give it up for the 2019 recipients of the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal, and please welcome my friend to the podium, Glenn H. Hutchins.
Take a look at it. Well done, Skip. It's my role and pleasure to welcome you all to the 7th Hutchins Center Honors. You might wonder why the welcome comes second rather than first, and that's because only Skip gets to go first. For reasons good reasons that you can see. Today we'll present the Du Bois Medal to a select group of people who have been trailblazers and lifetime achievers of distinction in the African American community. They join the esteemed society of past Du Bois Medal winners, a rarefied and august group. Congratulations. In that spirit, I would like to start by recognizing in the audience today the former Du Bois Medal winners and their families who are with us. Would you all please stand and be recognized? Come on, Richard. Richard, stand up. Stand up, Richard. Stand up. Come on. There you go. Bravo. I would don't sit down, Bill. I particularly like to single out William Julius Wilson, the venerable William Julius Wilson, whose lifetime of path-breaking academic work we celebrated this fall on the occasion of his most unwelcome retirement. Like JFK's remark about how the greatest gathering of genius in the White House was when Thomas Jefferson dined alone, Bill Wilson's many accomplishments and contributions to the field merited his own exclusive medal ceremony this past October. Congratulations, Bill, the most recent, until a few minutes from now, recipient of the Du Bois Medal. We congratulate you on your work, but we hope you finally fail at something, which is retirement. We're keeping the lights on in your office. Thank you. I would also like to thank today's presenters and readers who are gathered in the front row here. They're among the most eminent practitioners in their respective fields and are as impressive a group, and I can see them right here in front of me, impressive a group that has ever taken this stage. We appreciate all of you taking your time to be with us today. Thank you. I want to warmly welcome President Bacow. Thank you for joining us, Larry, for the second time. But especially thank you for your steadfast support for African and African American research at Harvard. You've been consistently not just a friend, but also a champion of the work of the center, and for that we're very grateful. Thank you. Next, I would like to recognize the members of our National Advisory Board who are present. Their contributions furnish vital support to the work of the center. I'm going to ask them all to stand as I call their name. Please hold your applause till the end. Richard Cohen, both an award winner and a member of the National Advisory Board. Virgis Colbert, Steve Cousins, Subrid Gajendrakar, I got that right. Jeremy Henderson, Sarah Manyika, Kia and Damon Martin, Ray McGuire, one of our presenters today, and Candace King-Weir. Thank you very much for your support. We urge anyone else in the audience who's feeling generous today to reach out to Skip or me. We take cash, checks, even Bitcoin if you'd like. We also have with us today Harvard's women's basketball team. Where are they? Up here. Where are they? Get a light on them here. They are led by Coach Kathy Delaney Smith, who last March notched her 600th career victory. Wow. Where are you, Kathy? Stand up. I know you're back here. Can we find? There she is, right back there. She is one of the most successful coaches, not just in Harvard history, but in the history of NCAA basketball. Congratulations, Kathy. Bravo. And thank you for bringing your team. On a more personal note, I'd like to point out that the Boston Celtics, team some of you know is near and dear to me, recently announced the hiring of Allison Pfister from the Harvard women's basketball class in 1998 as Director of Player Development. Another of what I hope will be first of many for our women's program. So, ladies, thank you for joining us. I want next to recognize a group of young men that has come to almost every single one of these events. The Harvard men's basketball team, led by Coach Tommy Amaker, who is someone who I admire enormously and am pleased to call my friend. Where are you guys? They're over here somewhere. There we go, right back here. Under Tommy's, by the way, some of you might know under NCAA rules, the coaches only get a certain amount of time with the players, and they use part of that very precious time to bring them here today, and that's a real statement of kind of values on the part of both the coaches. Under Tommy's masterful leadership, the men's team has won 6 of the last 8 Ivy League regular season championships. Last year, right here on this day, they promised us number 6, and they delivered. So what do you think, guys? Number 7 this year? What? I can't hear you. What? All right, good. I especially want to welcome the Harvard students who have joined us here today. As a member of the great class of 1977, I have a keen interest in making the undergraduate experience at Harvard the world's best for you, the undergraduates at Harvard. It's why, as part of my role chairing the most recent university-wide capital campaign, I also insisted on chairing the FAS campaign and focused on raising the funds necessary to renovate the houses that are so central to your Harvard experience. It's also why we made a big effort to get many of you here today. Professor Gates and I strongly believe that we do this primarily for you. It's great to have you here, and we hope that after today you will take advantage of the opportunity to become part of the daily life of the Hutchins Center. Thank you for coming. We also now have a tradition of inviting and welcoming students and teachers from schools and educational programs from the local area. And when I call out your school's name, I want to hear from you. All right, don't be shy. All right, you ready? The Boston Arts Academy, Boston College High School, Boston Community Leadership Academy. All right, well done. Now they are leaders. Boston Green Academy. There you go. All right, let's hear this in the proper language. Boston Latin School. Skip, was that Latin? Boston University Academy. Jeremiah Burke High School. And now you ready for this? Cambridge, Rindge, and Latin. Are you guys in your yellow sweatshirts again this year? I can't see up there. All right, good. Chapel Hill, Chauncey Hall. The Community Academy. Ooh, okay. I hope they're out doing some community work. Community Charter School of Cambridge. There you go. The Fessenden School. Really? Henderson Inclusion School. All right. Madison Park Technical Vocational High School. Matignon. There you go. Phillips Exeter Academy. Oh, come on, guys. That's all you got? Prospect Hill Academy. There you go. Now that's more like it. I want the admissions office to pay attention to this group up here. St. John Paul II Catholic Academy. Tech Boston Academy, the Windsor School, students from the Du Bois Society. No, they must be studying, okay. And finally, the team from Boston's Year Up program. All right, great. We hope all of you take inspiration from the work and achievements of all the people who grace this stage today. I certainly do. Now, what do you think, gang? Should we get this show on the road? All right, let's go.
So I'd like to actually exercise presidential privilege, because I'm departing from the script here, and first say there's been a lot of thank yous that have been extended, but I also would like to say thank you to Glenn and Debbie for making all of this possible, for underwriting the Hutchins Center, and really making this event what it is today. I also want to thank Skip Gates for his brilliant leadership of the Hutchins Center, and for being just such a wonderful colleague and friend, and an inspiration to so many of us. Skip, thank you. So it's my great pleasure to kick this off by recognizing our first honorand. Sheila Johnson has blazed trails and shattered ceilings throughout her life. A classically trained concert violinist as a youngster, Sheila was the first African-American woman to win a statewide violin competition in Illinois. Sheila is a dominant figure in the film and television industries and founded the Middleburg Film Festival. A successful serial entrepreneur, she can't help herself. Sheila is the CEO of the real estate and resort conglomerate Salamander Hospitality, which she founded in 2005. A major figure in the sports world, Sheila was the first African-American woman to serve on the board of the PGA, and has long been a prominent supporter of women and girls in sports. Sheila became the first African-American woman to be a partner or owner in 3 professional sports teams in 3 different leagues: the Washington Wizards, the Washington Capitals, and the Washington Mystics. If you want to know where to get tickets in Washington, talk to Sheila. As many of you know, the Washington Mystics won their first ever franchise championship just 2 weeks ago. And there's Sheila. Now, I've only just scratched the surface of Sheila's many accomplishments, but I'd like to take a few minutes to try and capture the spirit of this remarkable woman who has chosen to dedicate much of her fortune, much of her life to lifting up others, to supporting education and cultural activities, all with an eye toward doing good and helping others do better. I had the great pleasure of actually working with Sheila personally at the Kennedy School, where she created the groundbreaking Sheila C. Johnson Leadership Fellowship at the Center for Public Leadership, where I was a senior fellow. This fellowship program funded the education of students across disciplines who aspired to dedicate their lives and work to serving communities of color across these United States. Sheila chose the Kennedy School to create this fellowship because its students arrive with a commitment to public service and a desire to effect change, precisely the individuals who mirror Sheila's own commitment to translating passion into action. And having watched these students, having worked with these students are truly an inspiration. They are our future. She summed up her philosophy in her commencement speech a few years ago at the State University of New York at Morrisville. And I'd like to quote her. "I realized that after I graduated from high school, I always had a drive in me that desired to be the best that I could be. But still, I believed you should do unto others as you would have them do unto you." Since 2014, over 30 of Sheila's fellows have followed in her footsteps, blazing trails in affordable housing, medicine, education, public health, public service, architecture, and technology. And I know that a few of her former and present fellows are here with us tonight. In addition to her work with Harvard, Sheila serves as a global ambassador to CARE, humanitarian organization fighting global poverty. Her I Am Powerful Challenge raised over $8 million in 2007. Sheila serves as chair of the Board of Governors for the Parsons School of Design at the New School in New York, and funded the opening of the Sheila C. Johnson Design Center, combining classrooms, public programs, public spaces, and galleries. I've seen firsthand the living legacy that Sheila has created and that she has left upon Harvard and upon the world. I'd like to leave with you a personal testimony from Akeisha Ortiz, who worked closely with her as the program manager for the Sheila C. Johnson Fellowship. Akeisha wrote to our friends here at the Hutchins Center, and I quote, "She's been more than a donor. Sheila has nurtured fellows, broken bread with them, mentored them, laughed, listened, and shared so much of her life with them. Fellows call her Mama J. Her personal journey is beyond motivating. It is real, it is dynamic, it resonates. Sheila is very much like her logo, the salamander, the only animal that can walk through fire." Akeisha summed it up better than I could do. In business, entertainment, sports, philanthropy, and public service, Sheila has broken down barriers and opened doors, not just for herself, but she has held those doors open for others to follow. For this, we are enormously grateful. The Hutchins Center recognizes Sheila C. Johnson with the W.E. Du Bois Medal.
You know, I was sitting out in this audience a few years ago and watching all of this. I would have never dreamed that I would be up here now. So I want to thank you all so much for the kind words, and especially for the remarkable and humbling honor. I'd like to offer as well my congratulations to my fellow honorees and tell each of you how honored I am, at least for this one evening, to be mentioned in the same breath as you. And thanks as well to my friends here at Harvard for all your efforts to help make my fellowship program at the CPL School, Kennedy School, such an important opportunity for a group of students who might not have otherwise had the opportunity to gain a toehold on a brighter and more resonant future. I am not going to talk about myself today. I was introduced to the Kennedy School more than 6 years ago to help take on and fill a much-needed void. I wanted to offer a fellowship to fulfill dreams of the underserved and to increase diversity within the Kennedy School program and provide a universal experience to give those students a chance to play in the same sandbox as those of the privileged. I became their teacher, and in turn, they became the teachers that inspired me. We created a secure safety net with a brilliant group of Kennedy School staff who dedicated their time and energy to make sure these students had a shoulder to lean on for educational advice and emotional support. I want to salute and thank those people that held up those students and held me up. David Gergen, Patty Bellinger, Sharon Fluker, Robert Livingston, and Karen Weaver. I cannot thank all of you all enough for the love, support, and dedication to this program. My job was to put these fellows in front of politicians, icons in the business industry, sports team owners. In other words, I want to arm my fellows with the tools of negotiation and give them the self-confidence and opportunity to blaze a path to success. My fellows, you will always be with me forever. I am your Mama J. As you all know, the world is changing. I hope that if I could do anything for these young men and women, I want to inspire them to find their passion, find that fire, and then be tenacious in using it to light the world for the rest of us. I want them to never forget that we are a part of something bigger, and then when one of us suffers, we all suffer. I want them to learn to love, because love will always triumph over hatred. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lawrence Bobo. I'm the Dean of Social Science and the W.E.B. Du Bois Professor of the Social Sciences here at Harvard. I'm pleased to be able to offer you the first of what will be several selections of readings from W.E.B. Du Bois himself. These are two paragraphs from his third autobiography entitled The Autobiography of W.E.B. Du Bois, a soliloquy in view of my life from the last decade of its first century. Even today, the contradictions of American civilization are tremendous. Freedom of political discussion is difficult. Elections are not free and fair. Democracy is, for us, to a large extent, unworkable. In business, there is a tremendous amount of cheating and stealing. Gambling and card games on television and on the stock exchange is widely practiced. It is common custom for a distinguished person to sign books, articles, and speeches that they did not write, for men of brains to compose and sell opinions which they do not believe. Ghostwriting is a profession. The greatest power in the land is not thought or ethics, but wealth. And the persons who exercise the power of wealth are not necessarily its owners, but those who direct its use. And the truth about this direction is, so far as possible, kept a secret. We do not know who owns our vast property and resources, so that most of our argument concerning wealth and its use must be based on guesswork. Those responsible for the misuse of wealth escape responsibility, and even the owners of capital often do not know for what it is being used and how. The criterion of industry and trade is the profit that it accrues, not the good which it does either its owners or the public. Present profit is valued higher than future need. We waste materials, we refuse to make repairs, we cheat and deceive. We have succumbed to an increased use of lying and misrepresentation. In the last 10 years at least, 1,000 books have been published to prove that the fight to preserve Negro slavery in America was a great and noble cause, led by worthy men of eminence. I know the United States. It is my country and the land of my fathers. It is still a land of magnificent possibilities. It is still the home of noble souls and generous people. But it is selling its birthright. It is betraying its mighty destiny. I was born on its soil and educated in its schools. I have served my country to the best of my ability. I have never knowingly broken its laws or unjustly attacked its reputation. At the same time, I have pointed out its injustices and crimes and blamed it rightly, as I believe, for its mistakes. It has given me education and some of its honors, for which I am thankful. Thank you.
There is no afternoon like this one. It's really such a pleasure and a privilege to be here, and my honor to introduce Lonnie Bunch. So as a little boy, Lonnie Bunch's grandfather, a dentist who earlier in his life had been a sharecropper, would read history books to him. And young Lonnie was particularly bothered by the fact that the pictures of Black children, so kids like him, were most often labeled as unknown children or anonymous. It's easy to see the roots of his life's work in the questioning and discomfort. Early on, Lonnie knew that the story of African Americans in this country was incomplete, and he has devoted his entire professional life, over more than 30 years, to filling out that story, to finding the images and artifacts and histories that could articulate the beauty, complexity, and weight of the lives that have for hundreds of years been dismissed as anonymous and unknown. Born in Newark, New Jersey, Lonnie Bunch built on his academic training as an urban historian to become one of the foremost public historians in the country, a scholar who brings history to the people. Looking back at his time as the first curator of the California African American Museum, and as president of the Chicago Historical Society, and of course, as his long and impactful career at the Smithsonian, Lonnie summed up his guiding mission in an interview with Smithsonian Magazine. And he said, "As a historian, my whole career has been about expanding the canon, about making sure that you understand that the only way any of us can understand America is through different lenses." If museums are to accomplish their mission, he said that it's crucially important for them to open the veil of how they do the work they do, so that even they understand the implicit biases they carry, the cultural baggage. It's important to recognize that if we're going to engage the audience, if we're going to be places of value, then we must understand who we are and who we aren't. Lonnie Bunch's appointment as the 14th Secretary of the Smithsonian, the first African American to lead the institution in its 173-year history, was met with excitement throughout the museum and art worlds. And I think, honestly, the only person who was surprised by the outpouring of emotion and good wishes was Lonnie himself, which I think speaks volumes for his humility. The Washington Post's Philip Kennicott wrote, "As the first museum director to be named head of the Smithsonian in almost 75 years, he understands museums, which are the Smithsonian's greatest scholarly and public asset." Kinshasa Holman Conwell, deputy director of the National Museum for African American History and Culture, said, "This is a great moment for America. It's a great moment for the humanities, and there's no one on earth I admire more." If the chief job of a public historian is, as Kennicott said, to put forward unpleasant facts and discomforting truths, Lonnie Bunch has perfected that work, and nowhere more evidently than in the lines that still snake around the National Museum of African American History and Culture, a 400,000 square foot building designed by David Adjaye and within sightlines of the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial. With its more than 35,000 artifacts, the museum has, under Lonnie's founding and direction, brought the history of African Americans in this country into the light and has rendered it inextricable from the American history that the Smithsonian has put on view since its founding in 1846, a year in which Lonnie Bunch's ancestors were still enslaved, anonymous, and unknown. For his tireless commitment to and leadership in rendering the history of the United States and of African Americans vivid in all its diversity and richness, the Hutchins Center recognizes Lonnie G. Bunch III with the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal.
Now, this is a big deal for some guy from New Jersey, so. I cannot express to you how honored and humbled I am to receive this recognition. I want to thank the Hutchins Center and Skip Gates and Harvard because it allowed me to call my mother to say today and to say to her, I finally made it to Harvard. For a historian, W.E.B. Du Bois is the gold standard, a gifted and pioneering scholar who used his scholarship and his brilliance to fight for a freer and fairer America. When I was a kid, I was asked to do a book report, and I asked my dad, who should I write about? And I thought he was going to say Willie Mays or Mickey Mantle. Instead, he gave me Du Bois, The Soul of Black Folks. I didn't know what that was. And everybody in my class, when I gave the book report, didn't know what it was. But what I realized is that that publication inspired me and has been my North Star during my entire career. Because Du Bois gave me something I didn't know. He gave me a calling. He gave me a way to use history as a tool, no more than that, as a weapon, that forces America to confront its tortured racial past and it challenged America to live up to its stated ideals. So when we created the National Museum of African American History and Culture, we wanted it to be a significant presence on the mall because we wanted to make sure that the millions who came to the mall, the millions who knew the Smithsonian, would have to understand how central it is to America to understand the African American experience. What we wanted them to know was they couldn't understand themselves because America is profoundly shaped by the African American experience. And it was clear to me that we needed to bring some color to the National Mall. So today, I'm humbled by this award, humbled by this amazing cast of great people that I'm on the stage with. But I'm humbled because I know you're really not bestowing an award on me. You're honoring the power and importance of history, of African American history. And what you're doing is recognizing all of us are standing on the shoulders of so many. So I accept this award tonight on behalf of all those enslaved women who arose every morning to care for their children before they labored in the field and who refused to let slavery strip them of their humanity. I accept this award on behalf of all those families that left Alabama and Mississippi for the South Side of Chicago. I accept this award on behalf of women like my grandmother, who took in other people's laundry, who scrubbed other people's floors so her children and grandchildren wouldn't have to work on bended knee. And I accept this on behalf of all those who, despite discrimination, who despite the criminal justice or injustice system, and despite the poverty they faced, believed in and fought for an America that was yet to be. So by honoring me, what you are saying is there is nothing more powerful than a people, than a nation steeped in its history. And there is nothing more noble than honoring all of our ancestors by remembering. So I will remember tonight. I will cherish this medal. I wish my dad was here to see it. Thank you. I'll remember it forever.
Our next reading is the only one today not composed by W.B. Du Bois. It's a poem which Skip and I and many others in this audience, I imagine, saw delivered like a newborn child, full of hope and dreams, on a bitterly cold but deeply heartwarming January day in 2009. It's titled Praise Song for the Day by Elizabeth Alexander, subtitled A Poem for Barack Obama's Presidential Inauguration. Each day we go about our business, walking past each other, catching each other's eyes or not, about to speak or speaking. All about us is noise. All about us is noise and bramble, thorn and din, each one of our ancestors on our tongues. Someone is stitching up a hem, darning a hole in a uniform, patching a tire, repairing the things in need of repair. Someone is trying to make music somewhere, with a pair of wooden spoons on an oil drum, with a cello, boombox, harmonica, voice. A woman and her son wait for the bus. A farmer considers the changing sky. A teacher says, "Take out your pencils, begin." We encounter each other in words, words spiny or smooth, whispered or declaimed, words to consider, reconsider. We cross dirt roads and highways that mark the will of someone, and then others who said, "I need to see what's on the other side. I know there's something better down the road. We need to find a place where we are safe. We walk into that which we cannot yet see. Say it plain, that many have died for this day. Sing the names of the dead who brought us here, who laid the train tracks, raised the bridges, picked the cotton and lettuce, built brick by brick, the glittering edifices that they would then clean and work inside of. Praise song for struggle. Praise song for the day. Praise song for every hand-lettered sign, the figuring it out at kitchen tables. Some live by, love thy neighbor as thyself. Others by, first do no harm, or take no more than you need. But what if the mightiest word is love? Love beyond marital, filial, national, love that casts a widening pool of light. Love with no need to preempt grievance. In today's sharp sparkle, this winter air, anything can be made, any sentence begun, on the brink, on the brim, on the cusp. Praise song for walking forward in that light. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Good afternoon. My name is Jamaica Kincaid, and I'm a writer. It is an honor and a privilege to speak of Elizabeth Alexander. Two poets on a stage. Wow. When the goddess Demeter lost her beloved daughter to the rapacious greed of the god of death, she embarked on a journey to reclaim and reunite her to their divine and eternal union. As she wandered the earth, no other divinity could reason her out of the desire to find and claim her daughter, which she accurately could see was inextricably part of her own divine self. On one of her most part of her adventure, she entered the land of Eleusis, and learning that he had a baby son, offered herself up to be his nursemaid. She nursed the baby not with milk, but with ambrosia, the food of the gods, and each night she placed him in a fire that burned in the hearth in an effort to make him immortal. Immortal. Those are the words Elizabeth Alexander uses to transport and the experience of her people into words that will never die. Elizabeth Alexander herself is all too human, though her ancestral lineage is positively Olympus-like. She can trace her lineage from Charlemagne, King John, founders of Virginia. She has been twice nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, awarded an Anisfield Wolf Award, a Guggenheim Fellowship, among other luminous awards, and is now the president of the Andrew Mellon Foundation, the nation's largest supporter of the arts in higher education. But it is her triumphs as a poet, her spectacularly moving memoir about the death of her beloved husband, her Persephone, and her essays, works in which she rescues, retrieves what had been lost and stolen from her and her people, that she feeds ambrosia and bathes in a nightly fire that makes her, to my mind, quite like the legendary deity. In a poem from her collection, Antebellum Dream Book, she writes, "Baby. The doctor handed me a parfait dish of melting pink and coffee ice cream and said, 'Congratulations, a girl.' This bewildered me. I had not been pregnant, but I kissed the dish and put her in the deep freeze to see if she'd take shape." A poem that seems to hold within it the work of the goddess, giving shape and life to what should be and will be. In a poem titled Knowledge, she writes, "It wasn't as if we knew nothing before. After all, colored girls must know many things in order to survive. Not only could I sew buttons and hems, but I could make a dress and pantaloons from scratch. I could milk cows, churn butter, feed chickens, clean their coops, wring their nets, pluck and cook them. I cut wood, set fires, and boiled water to wash the clothes and sheets, then wrung them dry, and I could read the Bible. Evenings before the fire, my family, tired from unending work and New England cold, they'd close their eyes. My favorite was Song of Songs. They most liked when I read, 'In the beginning.'" The difficult thing about writing about Elizabeth was I wanted to hear more of her than I could stand my own voice, such is the wonder of poetry. But anyway. But and, these two conjunctions, two simple words, one making the word whole, the other setting it apart. These two words so important in spirit to any good writing that makes her particular genius comes into flower. And they occur in her memoir of losing her beloved companion, her soulmate, to our common destiny, death. That memoir of life and death, gain and loss, titled The Light of the World, chronicles her grief she experiences at this loss. She writes of their beginnings, their middle. Their end is something new in her vocabulary. His name, Fikr, suffuses the account of his sudden absence as if they had really been the light of her world, the light that suddenly went out as if snatched from her out of a fit of jealousy. "As I sit alone," she says with these words, "I think about how brave he was in so many ways and how brave he was to go into that studio every day with his demons and his angels and labor to them on canvas. No day without a line is the motto from Pliny the Elder, derived from the Greek painter Apelles, the devotions. Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. And I'm quoting Shelley here. And that statement remains overwhelmingly true. I take this to mean that a poet is more familiar with the beauty of justice and than the rest of us. And here I'm thinking of the thoughts and writing of the great Elaine Scarry. But true as that may be, no law can make a poet. No law has made Elizabeth Alexander. It is her unique presence and that presence foray into the world that has made her the person we are now honoring today. The Hutchins Center recognizes Elizabeth Alexander for her contributions to literature.
This is beautiful. I just want to look at it. It's beautiful. This is a profound honor. And before anything, I want to say thank you, Jamaica Kincaid, for me to be here with you and to be here with Rita Dove. Without your words, there are no poems of mine. And that is really specifically true. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And to receive this honor from the Hutchins Center, which I will irreverently call the house that Skip built, this place that centers Black culture, thought, legacy, creativity, and genius at the center of this university, is an honor of the greatest order. I cannot take for granted in the Hutchins Center what has been built here, a shining temple of legacy and vision of Black diaspora, where the world learns from Black diaspora and ideas are put into their own orbit. So thank you, Henry Louis Gates, and colleagues and friends, and Glenn Hutchins, for realizing and endeavoring to build this extraordinary house. To receive an award from this center at Harvard has particular meaning to me, so I want to tell you a couple of stories. My great-aunt Caroline Bond Day graduated from Radcliffe in 1930 and was the first Black woman to get an advanced degree in anthropology, which she did from this university. In 1932, Harvard published her anthropology thesis titled A Study of Some Negro White Families in the United States, a fundamental work that looked at race mixing in Black families. The sole purpose of her research in the field of anthropology, written and researched in the 1920s and the early 1930s, was to refute the mythology that said that through anthropology you could understand the inferiority of Black people and others. That was why she did her work. So, the archive for that book is here at the Peabody Museum. It's amazing, with photographs of her subjects, among them W.E.B. Du Bois, who had supported her research, was a teacher of hers in Atlanta University before she came to Harvard, because remember then, to be a Black person to come to Harvard, you had to have gone to a Black institution and received a degree before you could come and start all over again at places like Harvard. Through Du Bois, who also corresponded with her regarding her work at Radcliffe and Harvard, and some of those letters are at the Peabody as well. Through this work, she became the first Black person to formally turn the lens on her own family, in turn challenging those perceived inferiorities beyond. I talk about her because I think about that here as truly the early days of African American studies and a piece of the legacy of Du Bois. And so, to continue with stories and legacy and place to say where we are, I would be remiss if I did not mention that I am receiving this honor at the university that educated both of my parents, Adele Logan Alexander, Radcliffe 59, Clifford Alexander, Harvard 1955, where he made his own bit of history as student body president, first marshal of his class, and Lowell House athlete. He also played on the basketball team, so I tell you that to some of you gentlemen, led by our dear friend Tommy Amaker. And from those parents, I learned everything I needed to know. I learned about honesty, I learned about integrity, I learned about loving my people, I learned about serving my people, I learned about holding my people to account, I learned that you cannot believe the hype, ever. You can't believe things people say about you, you can't believe the things people say about your people, you can't believe the overhype. I learned from my parents to speak truth to power. I learned that sometimes when you speak truth to power, you don't always know if somebody is listening, but somebody is always listening. and somebody always needs your words. I learned from my parents to be unflaggingly generous. I learned from my parents to be a monster for knowledge, voracious, insatiable. Never stop learning and never stop sharing what you learn. I learned from my parents never to be satisfied with being the only one in the room. Never be the only one in the room. And so, all of that has served me well because finally I learned from them that the mightiest word is love. And I have everything to thank them for, but perhaps one small thing I would thank them for is the biggest thing of all, which is that they let me read and read and read and read and taught me to believe that the world was true in books and that everything I could need to know was found there, which I think of as being very much a part of the legacy of W.E.B. Du Bois. So, to be given this honor in the name of Dr. Du Bois is extraordinary. In my many years of reading and thinking about Du Bois and teaching Du Bois, because I think what I also want to say, and I know that this means a great deal to Skip, the field of African American studies has given me everything I have needed in the academy and in my work now in philanthropy. Two of his phrases have been mantras that I return to. The first, one line, a perfect line of iambic pentameter. I sit with Shakespeare and he winces not. And by that, a line I like to say, no literature, no word, no idea should be unavailable to any of us, and certainly not to a black child growing up. Du Bois, in that line, reminds us that culture is and must be and eternally is for everyone. Another line that I always carry in my pocket and is actually in my Twitter bio is that I call myself, in Du Bois's words, a co-worker in the kingdom of culture. This is how I see myself. This is how I see my community. This is how I see my service. And this is how I see my purpose, co-worker in the kingdom of culture. So finally, with all of my gratitude and all of my tremendous honor to be with these extraordinary people, I want to say that what I learn from Du Bois and what he teaches all of us is that the world is round, that black people are mighty everywhere on that globe, and that black people and all of us are connected around the globe, and that if we live by our ideas and through our words, then we shall be free. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm Martha Tedeschi, Director of the Harvard Art Museums. Truly, I couldn't be more thrilled, or indeed more honored, to be here to speak to you tonight regarding artist Kerry James Marshall. As a fellow Chicagoan, I have long admired Kerry James Marshall's art and consider him one of my artist heroes, and I'm certainly not alone in this. A few years ago, the New York Times art critic Holland Carter wrote of Kerry James Marshall, "Black skin is constant in Mr. Marshall's art. More than 3 decades ago, he resolved to devote himself to creating a new disruptive art history, one that would insert big time the absent black figure into the tradition of Western art, which was a tradition he loved and identified with. a new disruptive art history. This phrase gets to the heart of Marshall's mission. He is a master of formal considerations, and it is through form that he has cleared a path to what he refers to as reconsidering the question of what art is. In other words, to understand what is recognized as worthy of artistic representation, one must first understand the themes, compositions, and styles that have defined Western artistic production until now, the very tradition that Kerry James Marshall has set about to disrupt. When his first comprehensive 3-museum survey, Kerry James Marshall Mastery, traveled to the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles, Marshall said, "What you're trying to do is create a certain kind of indispensable presence, where your position in the narrative is not contingent on whether somebody likes you, or somebody knows you, or somebody's a friend, or somebody's being generous to you. But you want a presence in the narrative that's not negotiable, that's undeniable." At the Harvard Art Museums, Marshall's work has been at the center of so many important conversations, especially with young people, since we acquired his powerful, untitled portrait of a Black artist holding a palette of colorful paints in 2008, the year it was created. The year before, we were fortunate to have acquired his monumental 12-panel woodcut, also untitled, which in its portrayal of 6 Black men in domestic scenes references the art historical tradition of 17th century genre painting. And yet, Marshall complicates the tradition by presenting these men in an unexpected scene, by defying expectations of what a group of 6 Black men might signify in museum-goers' minds. Marshall is always interested in what viewers think they should see, and showing them something else. Exhibited at Harvard in late 2012, this epic woodcut, which you should see on the screen, and Marshall's public conversation about it also made visible the intentional work that museums must do to diversify not only their collections, but also their acquisitions committees and their curatorial ranks, as well as their leadership. Born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1955, and growing up in South Central LA in the early 1960s, Marshall felt the force of immense social change in his own life and surroundings. Those early years created in him a sense of social responsibility, something he carried through his training at the Otis Art Institute, from which he graduated in 1978, and where he received an honorary degree in 1999. When he said in a discussion with curator Susan Dackerman that somebody has to start placing Black figures at the very center of what the work is about, he was drawing not only on social considerations, but formal and artistic strategies as well. Western art has followed a particular set of rules that Marshall's work has studied, interrogated, and then systematically broken. Through his artistic sensibilities and the power of his convictions, not to mention his role as a teacher, Kerry James Marshall has become one of the most influential artists working today, anywhere. Marshall's work is in the collections of museums across the country, including, and to name only a few, the Art Institute of Chicago, LACMA, the Met, MoMA, the Whitney, the Walker Art Center, the Studio Museum in Harlem, and, as we've seen, the Harvard Art Museums. Kerry James Marshall was named a MacArthur Genius in 1997, and he was appointed by President Barack Obama to his Committee on the Arts and Humanities in 2013. His work continues to pose provocative challenges to what we have been conditioned to look for and look at in art, and thus in life. Marshall makes us see differently. He makes us see what has always been there, and also what has never been there before. For his reshaping of our understanding of art and its importance, and for rendering beautiful what has too often been made invisible, The Hutchins Center recognizes Kerry James Marshall with the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal. Congratulations.
Thank you. That's a lot of iron. You know, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, there are a lot of ways in which I think I have no business standing here on this stage, at this podium, in this company. I mean, I am surrounded right now by people that I have admired and who have inspired me for decades. And I'm one of those people who, you know, for my life coming up, college was not in the cards for me when I started out. And there's something about being here now, I mean, that is a part of a fulfillment of a mission that I had set for myself a long time ago. And a part of that was that, well, when there seems to be more than one way to get to Harvard than the conventional route that everybody else was supposed to take. And I'm gonna be brutally honest right now and say, I mean, if it wasn't for Skip Gates, I wouldn't be here at this moment. Skip Gates, the man is small in stature, but he carries a pretty big stick. And he's almost impossible to say no to. And he's impossible to say no to because the work that he did, outlining in theoretical forms the trajectory and the obligations of Black intelligence and Black intellectuals, has been sort of without parallel, without parallel. I remember there was an article in Art in America magazine with Skip Gates in conversation with Peter Berger. And he made a comment about what it means to be at the university and what the university stands for. And he said the university stands for the fact that everything that is discussed within the university, that the university's mission is to demonstrate that all those things that are discussed there are not only knowable, but they are teachable, which means that everything that can be known can be learned. And so for me, not on the path to come into college, to go into college anywhere, I set a mission for myself to find out exactly what it was one had to do. If you weren't going to go the conventional route, how could you still then end up at the top? And one of the things you discover along the way is that there's no substitute. There's no substitute for knowing. There's no substitute for learning. There's no substitute for exploration. There's no substitute for investigation. There's no substitute for questioning. There's no substitute for challenge. And there's no substitute for the hard work you got to do to get here. So when I was a child, on the first trip I took with my school to the Art Museum in Los Angeles, to the LA County Art Museum, the experience I had there was so overwhelming. And it was overwhelming in every way that you can say it. Not only was the work that was done by Rembrandt, the work that was done by Van Gogh, the work that was done by Gauguin, the work that was done by all the European artists who are the touchstones of Western art history, but the work that I encountered there that was done by Africans as well were equally as impressive, and three things left an indelible imprint on my mind when I left that museum. One of them was a figure that was done by the Senufo tribe of Mali called an executioner figure. It was the most uncanny thing. I had never seen anything like it in my life. I didn't know what it was. I was terrified of it. But it stuck in my mind as a memorable object because the configuration of that figure and the materials that were used to put it together left such an imprint on me that I could never forget it. The other two things that had a powerful effect on me were two paintings by Veronese. They were two allegorical figures, one of navigation and one of mathematics and science. And the reason those things impressed me so much was because they looked like superheroes. And that the scale that those works were operating on showed me that when you come into a place like that museum, you better be coming in there with something. You don't come in there halfway. And so when I left that museum, my goal from that point was to say, when I grow up and I become an artist, I want to have work of mine in this museum amongst these other works that I was coming to the museum to admire. Because at a certain point in your life, you have to come to terms with the fact that either you will always be out in the world going to places to look at magnificent things that other people do, or you can become a participant by trying to match the level of excellence that those people who made those things first achieved. And that the only way you can fulfill that is to understand fundamentally the terms under which all those things that were already there arrived. You have to know something of the logic that determined that these things were somehow worth seeing more than other things. And then at a certain point you realize that it's not excellence alone that determines whether an object ends up in a museum, because a lot of people make excellent things, and some of those things never find their way in the museum too. But that there are other levels of engagement, other levels of investment in the practice that are worth taking control of as well. And one of them is the way in which people understand the operation of the things that are there. And so when I set the challenge for myself to only paint black figures, it was against the backdrop of an idea in color theory that blackness represented absence, that blackness represented the lack of color, that blackness was to be avoided at all costs in color theory, and that if you wanted to color in a painting that looked like it was black, you had to create that color out of other colors without resorting to things that were fundamentally black. But I set the challenge to myself to try and figure out how to make black chromatic, how to treat black paint the same way you would treat blue paint, green paint, or any other color paint. So that if you go to the art supply store and you see an ultramarine blue, a cobalt blue, a phthalo blue, and a cerulean blue, well, that's 4 different kinds of color, and each one of those colors do different things. Well, the same is true with black, you can discover. So that when I go to the art supply store, I can buy an ivory black, a carbon black, and an iron oxide black, also known as Mars black. Those 3 colors may appear in the jar as if they are one single thing, that they lack complexity. But if you put those things side by side, then you see that they are all different from each other. And that because an object is rendered fundamentally black, it doesn't collapse into simplicity. And so if I've been able to do anything that puts me in a position to be deserving of a medal like this, that is the thing I think I have done. And I appreciate Skip, the Hutchins Center, everybody on the committee at Harvard who was responsible for making the selection. I really do thank you and appreciate the recognition, and I am so honored to be here. Thank you.
I'm Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham. I am the Victor S. Thomas Professor of History and of African American Studies. And I am also the chair of the History Department. The department, don't clap yet, the department from which W.E.B. Du Bois received his PhD in 1895. You can tell I'm proud of that. I'm going to read to you from The Souls of Black Folks. The passage is from Alexander Crummell, on Alexander Crummell. So the man groped for light. All this was not life. It was the world wandering of a soul in search of itself, the striving of one who vainly sought his place in the world, ever haunted by the shadow of a death that is more than death, the passing of a soul that has missed its duty. 20 years he wandered, 20 years and more, and yet the hard, rasping question kept gnawing him. What in God's name am I on earth for? In the narrow New York parish, his soul seemed cramped and smothered. In the fine old air of the English university, he heard the millions wailing over the sea. In the wild, fever-cursed swamps of West Africa, he stood helpless and alone. The valley of the shadow of death gives few of its pilgrims back to the world. But Alexander Crummell, it gave back. Out of the temptation of hate and burned by the fire of despair, triumphant over doubt and steeled by sacrifice against humiliation, he turned at last across the waters, humble and strong, gentle and determined. He never faltered. He never complained. He simply worked, inspiring the young, rebuking the old, helping the weak, and guiding the strong. So he grew and brought within his wide influence all that was best of those who walk within the veil. They who live without knew not nor dreamed of that full power within, that mighty inspiration which the dull gauze of caste decreed that most men should not know. And now that he is gone, I sweep the veil away and cry, lo, the soul to whose dear memory I bring this little tribute. I can see his face still, dark and heavy-lined beneath his snowy hair, lighting and shading, now with inspiration for the future, now in innocent pain at some human weakness, now with sorrow at some hard memory from the past. The more I met Alexander Crummell, the more I felt how much that world was losing which knew so little of him. In another age, he might have sat among the elders of the land in purple bordered toga. In another country, mothers might have sung him to the cradles. He did his work, he did it nobly, he did it well, and yet I sorrow that here he worked alone with so little human sympathy. His name today in this broad land means little and comes to 50 million ears laden with no incense of memory or emulation. And herein lies the tragedy of the age. Not that men are poor, all men know something of poverty. Not that men are wicked, who is good? Not that men are ignorant, what is truth? Nay, but that men know so little of men.
Good afternoon. I'm Danielle Allen, and my friends know that I don't normally like to do things like this in public, but for all the students, I do want to say I'm the James Bryant Conant University Professor at Harvard University. And you can be too. That position was held previously by John Rawls, the most important political philosopher of the 20th century. So I've got some work to do. I'm also a student of Cornell West, I wanted to say. And this is an afternoon and evening for legacy and genealogy. That's what we're talking about and all the shoulders that we stand on. It's also about presiding spirits. Some of mine are here tonight. Kerry knew that already. He's been one of my presiding spirits for a long time. It's an old connection in Chicago. Rita didn't know that until tonight, but you have been, mother love. This was a girl who wanted to be a poet and who looked for presiding spirits in the world. And Rita Dove, the remarkable poet, made space and shelter, made clear that there was room and a welcome. As we've heard so much already, this year's Hutchins Center honorees are possessed of numerous gifts and vast talents. All are at the top of their chosen fields and callings. I would venture a guess, though, that only one honoree in the history of the Du Bois Medals is a Pulitzer Prize winner, was the youngest and first African-American poet laureate of the United States, won both a National Humanities Medal and a National Arts Medal, was awarded an honorary Doctor of Letters by Harvard, has played viola da gamba with an early music group, sung with her university's operatic society, and is an accomplished ballroom dancer. Rita contains multitudes. Harvard's own distinguished professor of poetry, Helen Vendler, wrote of Rita's poetry, "She planes away unnecessary matter, leaving only pure shapes." Skip has said that her writing is steeped in Black literary and historical tradition. It is suffused with the rhythms and the images of the Black vernacular. It is elegant and ordinary, and that's what makes it an opening. What we see in Dove's poetry, whether its subject is her grandparents' marriage or the career of Beethoven's young Black apprentice, is a reverence for the lives of ordinary people. Those, as she puts it, who will never make it into the history books. This reverence extends to their interior lives, for as she has said, if we don't acknowledge our own interior lives, we don't permit others to have them. The mutual recognition of interiority is the most secure barrier against inflicting harm or brutality on others. As poet laureate, a post she held from 1993 to 1995, her mission was to elevate poetry to a level of national importance that society rarely grants it. Her cause was to communicate that while poetry may not change the world, though I disagree with you there, Rita, poetry changes the world. But what you said was, even if we don't want to make that claim because of our humble hearts, it can change a heart, it can change a moment. Characterized by this mission to elevate and educate, Dove's career has also been devoted to finding and restoring the Black lives so often sidelined or lost within the European literary tradition. The tradition that housed, but didn't necessarily nourish her. This impulse to expand the landscape of what is understood as mainstream canonical poetry was at work when she performed the role of sole editor of the Penguin Anthology of 20th Century American Poetry. Think of what that means for Rita Dove to have given us the anthology of 20th century American poetry. Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. She just changed our world. She got pushback for her anthology. She troubled received wisdom in her choices and collections. And she said about that, raising hackles means you're not being ignored. You're pushing the conversation forward. She has pushed this conversation forward for many years in a language uniquely hers, but available to all of us. American Academy of Poets Chancellor Ellen Bass said of her writing, "The depth of Rita Dove's insight is astonishing. She sees into our most complex relationships and renders those truths with startling precision. She delivers us to ourselves with technical virtuosity and luscious music. Her poems torch us with beauty and brutality, innocence and ruin. Fiercely political and exactly intimate, this is brilliant poetry at its height." As Jamaica said, you can't talk about a poet without hearing a poet. I picked a poem about Demeter also, as it happens. Demeter's prayer to Hades. There's a theme. So just a small number of my favorite lines from Rita Dove. "This alone is what I wish for you. Knowledge. To understand each desire and its edge. To know we are responsible for the lives we change. For the lives and worlds she has opened up to us and changed. And for her reconstitution of the canon of American poetry, the Hutchins Center recognizes Rita Dove with a W.E.B. Du Bois Medal."
Thank you. You need good posture for this medal. It's heavy. There are so many people I'd like to thank, but we'll be here until the next winter rolls in. So instead, I'd like to tell you how W.E.B. Du Bois saved me at an incremental, really amazing moment of my life. To do that, however, I must go back to one of my beginnings. In that beginning was a mother who, though she had skipped 2 classes in high school and was given a scholarship to Howard University, was not allowed to go because her parents thought she was too young at 16 to go off alone to college. But this mother loved literature, and on a good day, and there were many good days, she could be found in the kitchen slicing up the family roast, declaiming, "Is this a dagger I see before me, the handle toward my hand?" I, as a child, did not know that that was Shakespeare. I thought it was my mother talking jive. She did that well. And so when I did come across those lines of Macbeth years later, it was too late. My mother had already claimed ownership. And to paraphrase what Elizabeth said so eloquently, that Du Bois quote, "She sits with Shakespeare and he winces not." It also begins with a father who was a chemist. In fact, he was the first Black chemist in the rubber industry. I did not know that as a child. I did not know that he had ferried his classmates in the elevator before they finally broke that barrier. What I did remember, however, was how he loved to read history And on 3x5 index cards, he would write mini reviews of each book that he read, and I'd find them tucked in the jacket flaps. And I looked for those mini reviews. They were like these love letters from my father saying, read this, or don't read this, whichever he wanted. And so there was poetry in the house, and there were books on the shelves. For that, I am eternally grateful. And I read those books voraciously without knowing that they were supposed to be difficult, because like Elizabeth's parents, they let me read everything, thank goodness. But there was one book I could not read because it was in another language. It was in German. It was a beautiful little letterpress volume of Schiller's Lied von der Glocke, Song of the Bell, a long poem, and I wanted to read that poem. It turned out my father, before going off to World War II, had decided that he should learn the language of the enemy. Those are his words, not mine. And so, because he did not know where he was going to be deployed, he taught himself basic Italian and German. And that little book gotten from a secondhand bookstore was part of his self-education. And that's how I became interested in German. And so I studied it, and then I discovered that I shared a birthday with Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, who happened to be a mentor of Schiller, who had written this marvelous poem. So I had to read all of him too, of course. And I discovered that my love for tangents, for going off in different directions, for following something and learning as much about it as I could, was something that I had shared with Goethe. One of my professors in college, in fact, gave me a little slip of paper, and he said, you might need this later on down the line, and I kept it in my wallet for years. It was a quote by Faust, in Goethe's Faust, where he says, entbehren sollst du, sollst entbehren. It means thou learn to live without, basically. And I thought, well, why did he give me this? So I took this Yoda bit of, advice with me and went to Germany. I was in Germany for a year as a Fulbright student, and there I truly felt homesick. I felt homesick for my people, for my language, for my community and everything. And so I went to the library to find some English. And I remembered, of course, that W.E.B. Du Bois had been in Germany 80-some years before that. Perhaps he could help me. So I got out Souls of Black Folk again. I reread it, and there was that quote, entbehren sollst du, sollst entbehren, which he had put down too. And I realized that it wasn't that Faust was saying, you have to do without, but he was saying, why do I have to do without? Grab it all. So I remembered my mother belting out Shakespeare in the kitchen. I remembered my father with those 3x5 index cards, and I just sucked it in and said, I'm carrying on. That led me back to the States, back to volunteering to translate the German lecture for a German novelist who turned out to be my husband. Sitting in the audience today, 43 years of arguing over prepositions and past participles. And I can thank W.B. Du Bois for that. I also thank the Hutchins Center, Skip, treasured friend for, well, we go way back, okay? For so many years. And all of you out there, believe in your dreams, follow your tangents. They come together somehow if you love it. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Tommy Shelby. I am the Caldwell Titcomb Professor of African and African American Studies and also Professor of Philosophy. It is my great privilege to also be the chair of the Department of African and African American Studies. So it's my honor to read a brief passage from the great Du Bois. This passage comes from his book from 1940, Dusk of Dawn, an essay toward an autobiography of a race concept. It's a reflection on Jim Crow, but also an interesting riff on perhaps the most famous allegory in all of Plato's works. It is difficult to let others see the full psychological meaning of caste segregation. It is as though one looking out from a dark cave in a side of an impending mountain sees the world passing and speaks to it, speaks courteously and persuasively, showing them how these entombed souls are hindered in their natural movement, expression, and development, and how their loosening from prison would be a matter not simply of courtesy, sympathy, and help to them, but an aid to all the world. One talks on evenly and logically in this way, but notices that the passing throng does not even turn its head, or if it does, glances curiously and walks on. It gradually penetrates the minds of the prisoners that the people passing do not hear, that some thick sheet of invisible but horribly tangible plate glass is between them and the world. They get excited, they talk louder, they gesticulate. Some of the passing world stop in curiosity. These gesticulations seem so pointless. They laugh and pass on. They still either do not hear at all, or they hear, but dimly. And even what they hear, they do not understand. Then the people within may become hysterical. They may scream and hurl themselves against the barriers, hardly realizing in their bewilderment that they are screaming in a vacuum unheard, and that their antics may actually seem funny to those outside looking in. They may even, here and there, break through in blood and disfigurement and find themselves faced by a horrified, implacable, and quite overwhelming mob of people frightened for their own very existence. Thanks.
My name is Raymond J. McGuire, Harvard College, A.B., English and American Literature, Harvard Law School, Juris Doctor, Harvard Business School, Masters of Business Administration, currently Vice Chairman, Citigroup. I am so excited to be here. President Bacow, most distinguished Professor Gates, and preeminent businessman and exemplary philanthropist Hutchins. Only you could convene such a gathering in such a hallowed hall in which I grew up. When I get overwhelmed with feelings like this, I need to get help from one of the great philosophers of the 20th century, James Brown. I feel good. Anyways, they told me to restrict my comments to a few minutes, but in this room with all these folks, with all the material I have and the person about whom I'm going to talk, I could get Pentecostal. For those of you who don't know what that means, I could spend a couple hours, but I'm going to say like the preacher would say back home, I won't be long. It is truly a privilege to be here amongst such an august group of honorees for such an essential gathering. You represent the power and influence which in today's environment we so desperately need. You stand tall in the modern day Mount Rushmore of civil rights. Thank you for carrying the torch. While I am honored and privileged to make this introduction, his standing and accomplishments need no introduction. This afternoon, I plead the Academy give me leave and liberty to enter Robert Smith into the canon's pages so that those who are the stewards indelibly inscribe him into history's pages. Please record his tenure as one of the most successful and influential in the 20th and 21st centuries in the global world of business, in the pantheon of philanthropy. And so how do I introduce a friend whose stature commands so much respect and admiration? It is like sharing the gift of a legend whom I've known since his early days. He is a titan amongst the giants. I could recite his biography, which is extraordinary, with innumerable distinctions. Included in that biography is the lessons of his parents, two noble educators who instilled in him a distinct curiosity and gifted mind that has earned him at least 4 patents, a chemical engineering degree from Cornell, and an MBA from Columbia Business School. In that biography, I could highlight what is implicit. Robert Smith lived by the time-tested code of race and equality, that in order to be equal, you had to be the best. He mastered the skills of finance. He became an expert in the language of technology. He demonstrated again and again that he was the best. With his unassailable talent, with his will to win, with his vision of the world's future, he did what no one else has done in technology. He founded Vista Equity, a private equity firm focused on technology software, the now and future of technology. Robert Smith operates on the frontier. Vista has almost $60 billion of capital under management. He employs more than 60,000 people. In his venture, he is without peer. I'm reminded of what Ralph Ellison told us in that masterpiece that changed the shape of American literature, Invisible Man. Play the game, but don't believe in it. Robert's addendum is, until you can run it. Today, Robert Smith runs the game globally. And while he is celebrated because of his enormous successes, his legacy will be that Robert made billions and that Robert gave away billions. He has done well by himself. He has done well by others. His mother's example taught him to give back. And even though history will record him as philanthropic royalty, it will also record his higher purpose. It will show that Robert Smith is the answer to the ever-present question that we ask every kid, from the neighborhood streets to the Park Avenue penthouses, from kindergarten through graduate school. When you grow up, what do you want to be? In the list of responses, especially for black and brown girls and boys, they can now say, I want to be in technology. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be like Robert Smith. And down in Atlanta, Georgia, just a few months ago at Morehouse College, I can just imagine a young student, Tyrese Johnson, calling his grandfather right after graduation from Morehouse. And I imagine the call would go something like this. Grandpa, we got it done. We graduated from Morehouse. Today, I am a Morehouse man. Thank you, Grandpa. We wouldn't have made it here without you. And I know you wanted to be here, but you couldn't make it because of your health. But Mama and Grandma, they're here representing. They've been shouting. You haven't heard yet, probably, but at graduation, we heard Mr. Robert Smith say that he was going to pay off all of our student debt. And Tyrese would go on and say, I didn't know anybody really had that kind of money. Especially somebody who looked like me. He said, I could not believe that it was real. He said, I know, Grandpa, you taught me to never cry, but I couldn't hold back my tears. I know that y'all borrowed a lot of money to keep me here. I know that Mama worked 2 jobs. And she kept going down to the credit union to take money out of savings. And I know it was hard. And my plan was to work every day so that I could pay it back and y'all wouldn't have to worry. But then Mr. Smith paid it all off. We don't have any more student debt. And none of my classmates and their families have any student debt. Morehouse taught us that we could fly. Mr. Smith taught us that we could soar up there with them eagles. And you would hear silence on the other end as his grandfather gathered himself, and then his grandfather said, son, our prayers have been answered. And all I can say is, like the scripture says, and I believe it was from Psalms, he said, I've been young and now I'm old. I've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor their seed begging bread. When y'all get home, we're going to pray for Robert Smith. For his having changed lives and forever and profoundly transformed the global philanthropic and business landscape, the Hutchins Center presents Robert S. Smith, the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal.
Well, what a beautiful introduction by Brother Ray, Brother Raymond J. McGuire. It's important to note there would be no Robert Smith if there wasn't a Raymond J. McGuire. I first learned of Ray in a magazine over 25 years ago. And growing up in Denver, Colorado, I didn't know people like Ray existed. I lived in a beautiful community of black people. Beautiful black mother, beautiful black father, who taught me the importance of community, who taught me the importance of education, of excellence. I had a father who, on Sundays, sang opera in Italian and in German, and spoke Latin to his friends. And a mother who graduated salutatorian at Dunbar High School in Washington, D.C. and was admitted to Radcliffe College. And a grandfather who admitted to me when I was going to college that he didn't have the money to send her to school. That carries with me every day. And so when I got into Cornell, I decided first, I'm going to pick the hardest major that they have, and I'm going to be the best at it. And as I was a practicing chemical engineer, I read about Raymond J. McGuire, Harvard undergraduate, Harvard JD, Harvard MBA. I said, they don't make them any better than that. And I decided it's time to go back to graduate school. I was living in New York, and I got into the JD MBA program at Columbia University. And a good friend of Raymond's, and now mine, introduced me to Ray. And they both changed my life. I was thinking of a career in consumer products and packaged goods, and they helped me understand the world of capital. They helped me understand this world of mergers and acquisitions at the highest levels in the capital structure, board-level discussions, CEOs making decisions, and they helped me understand that there were only one or two of them in those boardrooms. And that was the hardest thing to do. So I said, that's what I'm going to go do. And so I joined Goldman Sachs in the Mergers and Acquisitions Department, and I helped start what is our tech group today. And every day along the way, I thought about that beautiful community that I came from, of those people whose hopes and dreams are on shoulders like mine. I thought about the fact that I had a window of opportunity that opened for me. I was born at a time when they decided to desegregate the schools to create opportunity for African Americans to take part in the education of opportunities in this country. When they decided to effect forced busing to make that happen, some racists decided to burn 1/3 of the buses. So only one bus came to my neighborhood. So rather than the entire neighborhood getting to go to a better school, only one busload of us did. And when I look today, years back, at the kids who were on that bus versus the kids who were one block away who didn't get on that bus, there's a vast difference in education, in where they are economically, and how their kids are actually progressing. And I realized that part of my job is to create opportunity. And so when I put all of that together, and I think about what I have to do is I have to open that veil. I have to get that light into our community and take all of that brilliance that is represented on this stage and all that brilliance that was represented in my neighborhood and ensure they had opportunity to go become the best that they can be so they can become Ray McGuire. and Robert Smith. To me, that's my job. It is to liberate the human spirit. And I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate that I've had a chance to meet people along the way who have helped me, educated me, given me tools and skills and experiences and taken chances so that I can do that. I'm fortunate to be here at Harvard, accepting this medal on behalf of my mother, who didn't get to attend Radcliffe. So Skip, thank you for that. And I know my mother loves you dearly. I love her too. And I want to thank you and the Hutchins Center and all that you all do to keep our spirit alive.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, my brother. My name is William Julius Wilson. Louis P. and Linda L. Geiser University Professor Emeritus. And I have the pleasure of reading two short paragraphs from W.E.B. Du Bois's Black Folk, Then and Now, published in 1939. It is generally recognized today that no scientific definition of race is possible. Differences, and striking differences there are between men and groups of men. But so far as these differences are physical and measurable, they fade into each other so insensibly that we can only indicate the main divisions in broad outline. Of the psychological and mental differences which exist between individuals and groups, we have, as yet, only tentative measurements and limited studies. These are not sufficient to divide mankind into definite groups, nor to indicate the connection between physical and mental traits. Especially, it is difficult to say how far race is determined by a group of inherited characteristics and how far by environment and amalgamation. Race would seem to be a dynamic and not a static conception, and the typical races are continually changing and developing, amalgamating and differentiating. In this book, then, we are studying the history of the darker part of the human family, which is separated from the rest of mankind by no absolute physical line and no definite mental characteristics, but which nevertheless forms as a mass a series of social groups, more or less distinct in history, appearance, and in cultural gift and accomplishment. Thank you.
One medal left. My name is Marcelina Morgan. I am the Moran Professor of Social Sciences and the founding director of the Hip Hop Archive at Harvard University. No matter what others tell you, it is the only one in the world. Okay? It is an honor and a dream come true to introduce Dana Elaine Owens, Queen Latifah, tonight. I'm going to try to not lose my mind here, because we really want to hear from her as well. This isn't Queen Latifah's first time at Harvard. In 2003, she was named Artist of the Year by the Harvard Foundation. In citing the accomplishment that brought her the honor, the late Alan Counter commented on one of the most potent. Latifah is, he said, a pillar of female strength. Indeed, just last week, as the host of the Women's Achievement Summit in Richmond, Virginia, she spoke about workplace gender discrimination, one of the themes of the gathering. Quote, I decided to be my own boss at an early age because of that, because I felt that there were a lot of guys telling me what I should be doing, all right. Let me just say, Latifah had it up to here, okay? Because I felt that there were a lot of guys telling me what I should be doing, when I felt like I was smarter than they were, and I felt like I was stronger than they were, and I did not want to be told what to do by them. Of course, she has had a number of workplaces, and there's not one in which she hasn't distinguished herself. A Grammy-winning MC and an Emmy and Oscar-nominated actor, she's dominated every field she has entered. From the beginning, she was a savvy entrepreneur. Coupled with her outsized talent for music, she quickly became an unstoppable cultural force. Her debut album, 1989's All Hail the Queen, I felt so good about myself. I can't tell you, looking at that and watching her. It was released on Tommy Boy and sold more than 1 million copies and earned her first Grammy nomination. Just 2 years later, she had founded and become CEO of Flavor Unit Records and Management Company. In just 2 years after that, her company had signed 17 rap groups, including Naughty by Nature. Flavor Unit Entertainment is still thriving today. Not a bad track record in the fast-changing music industry. It was the single, U-N-I-T-Y, that earned her a Grammy Award, the first time a woman had won in the Best Rap Solo category. Her peer pioneer, who also has received the Bois Medal, MC Lyte, calls it one of the most important songs in hip-hop. She told Billboard magazine, quote, it was extremely impactful for the genre of hip-hop to finally hear a strong voice of a positive black woman speaking about uplifting young women. To date, it's still one of my favorite songs, end quote. The women artists who have become famous for controlling their own careers, Beyonce, for instance, owns a significant debt to Queen Latifah. The writer Heather Wood Rudolph wrote of Latifah that when she, quote, introduced herself to the world as Queen Latifah, bursting onto the hip-hop scene, demanding respect as an artist, a rapper, and a woman, it was only fitting that she had crowned herself queen. Rudolph wrote, Latifah called out the misogyny in hip-hop at a time when women in the industry weren't being given opportunities to ask for much at all. She infused feminism into rap music when female artists were barely allowed through the door, and then she left it open. And as those of us who keep up with what's going on in hip-hop know today, she's still playing that role, and we really, really appreciate it. I do want to say, as an academic studying hip-hop, we end up looking at things from disciplinary perspectives. And at one point, I was doing some writing, and I was writing about language and hip-hop. And I got caught up in the discussion that was going on with Two Life Crew and various other groups. And this group of women came out called BWP. And it was women's voice against the misogyny, what have you, in hip hop. A lot of people think women don't fight back or whatever, but a lot of us don't hear women's voices, okay? And so, yeah, no, but BWP stands for Bitches with Problems. And they operated with a list of things that got on their nerves. I won't go into the list, you can look it up. But they asked Queen Latifah, you know, what did she think? And she said, I'm down with the bitches, you know? I don't even know if you remember that, but I loved it, okay. So the genre, but that's what you did. That's the thing about academics. You gotta, you know, we're checking it out, saving it, you know, like, I see. And, you know, if you think about it, we're working there, we're working, we're thinking, and in the back of our minds, we're dealing with sexism, we're dealing with racism, we're dealing all with the same thing. And to have our artists really stating things, singing songs, playing music, doing all that they're doing, writing poetry to help us figure out that we're not alone in this world, I think is an incredibly important thing, and we thank you so much for that. This genre-jumping star of films and TV who sings and raps with equal style, who controls her own image, also pays heed to the shoulders she stands on. Whether it's giving cameos to Shelley Thunder, Harmony, and Miss Melody in her iconic Ladies First video, or crediting her mother with providing a model for the kind of artist she strove to be. Queen Latifah, in the words of hip-hop scholar and educator Gwendolyn Poe, demands that women be seen, heard, and respected. She is and has always been there when women and girls needed to know that they were seen and heard and could accomplish anything. She was Cleo for us, Khadija, Aunt Shaniqua, Regina Bookman, Dee Dee, Carlotta Brown, Mama Morton. She has made it known that she will not be called out of her name, that she is there for all women who are trying to work it out. And as we respect each other, we will be able to work it out and win this game. Queen Latifah embodies the creed of our forebears who lifted as they climbed. She has held hip-hop to a higher standard and has transformed American culture. The Hutchins Center recognizes Queen Latifah with the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal.
Congratulations.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. She's right, this thing is heavy. Thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you so much for the center, the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research, Harvard University. How about that? Lonnie, we straight from the bricks. I mean, you know what I'm saying, Lonnie? Newark, New Jersey in the building. There was only one way that I would come here. And first of all, thank you for Dr. Henry Louis Gates here, Jr. And that was that I would be able to come accept, and that was if my partner Sha Kim compare, who's sitting in the audience, just give a little wave, Sha, so everybody just, they can't see that. A little bit higher, a little bit higher. He's not very, you know, he doesn't like to be in front of the camera so much. But the only way I would come is if he would come with me, because wherever you see me, you see him. Yeah. We've been partners for, we've been friends since high school and since 10th grade, and we've been partners in business my entire career. Even before we formed our company, he would come to meetings with me at my record label and just sit there quietly as I would have meetings with these executives. And afterwards, we would talk about it. He observed, he listened, he listened, he listened and listened and listened until he was finally ready to speak. And when he spoke, he had a lot to say. And we had a lot to say to one another. Despite where we came from, we had big dreams. We saw way down the road, and we talked about those things a lot. But let me back it up. Backing it up. If you are 18 years or younger, make some noise up in this building. It's okay if you're 19 and up. But I expect that you probably are a student here. I was inspired by my parents. My father was a Newark police officer, tactical police officer, lethal weapon kind of guy, but cool as hell, excuse my language, stylish, and spoke in metaphors quite often. I had to decipher that as a child. My mother was an art teacher. She would call herself an educator. And I loved the way she would say, I'm an educator, when people asked her what she did. Because what she truly did was educate. She educated me from the day I was born. She educated my friends. She educated other people's children. She raised other people's children, my partner included. She told them that they could be anything they wanted to be if they put their minds to it. It's funny because I lost my mother not too long ago, and she would be in a hospital bed, and you know, a young kid, a young brother would come in there mopping or sweeping or something, and then this young particular guy, he had his pants kind of sagging, and he'd come in the room, get the garbage, sweep up, whatever. She'd strike up a conversation with him. What's your name? How do you like working here? What do you plan on doing? And before you know it, she was engaging this kid who was coming in here looking like this, sweeping and grabbing garbage, sagging. And would continue to engage him from her hospital bed when she's the one there for treatment. And after a couple days, you notice that his pants got a little higher. and his head started to raise higher. He came in the room like this, not like this. And he said, "Good morning," or "Good afternoon," or "How you feeling today, Miss Owens?" So from her position, she was able to raise his position. And she was the one that was there for treatment. It just speaks to the power of one person and how you can make a difference in someone's life. You don't have to be a billionaire. You just have to see something and want to do something about it. Robert Smith saw something and wanted to do something about it. Something he saw way before he was a billionaire. He saw imbalance. He saw injustice. Rita Dove saw the beauty in the world in a different way and was able to express that. So was Miss Alexander. I read a poem by Nikki Giovanni on the way over here, just for the heck of it. I was like, I gotta calm my nerves, so I wrote a good omelet and I ate a good poem. The name of the poem is I Wrote a Good Omelet. After loving you. Anyway, I digress. I feel so honored to be up here on the stage among such great people who've done so many accomplished things. What Sheila's done for so many people and what you continue to do, the example you are. My mother was an art teacher, so Kerry, you already know how I feel. My mother's birthday was September 28th, and what I've been trying to do is protect her art. I can't replace it. Her sketches, her sketchbooks, things, you know, she had to come live with me in California for a while, and I'm like, we gotta protect the artist. It's in the garage, it's in Jersey, who knows what kind of weather's going on. And I've literally been grabbing portfolios and putting little things here and going through pictures. And so for her birthday, as a celebration, we put this art, my mother's art, on display around the house and had a barbecue. Because I don't know if my family even had an opportunity to see what she did, what I saw growing up. All of these paintings and these sketches and these beautiful things that my mother created. They got to see Miss Owens, the art teacher. Miss Owens, the aunt, Aunt Rita. But they didn't get to see her work. And so it was like an art show in my house, and my family was so impressed, and her friends were blown away. And a lot of it was power to the people up in those pictures. And I got to see African art at a very early age. I knew that the world was bigger than what most of my friends in Newark, New Jersey got to see. But I also knew that Newark was rich in culture and talent, that Sarah Vaughan was born in Newark, and Whitney Houston is from the Newark area, Frank Sinatra, Jerry Lewis, and on and on and on. I got to go to the Newark Museum as a kid and see artwork. I got to see books by Salvador Dali, but also Romare Bearden. So Romare Bearden is a black painter for the high school kids. You can look him up. But I'm not going to talk too long because I know you've been here a very long time, and I just want to shout out a few people that made a difference in our lives. My grandfather owned a hardware store, and so he showed me that black people could do business. My grandmother told me she worked at Picatinny Arsenal during the war making bombs. She felt like that was her contribution to helping America win. She also raised 9 kids. My other grandmother, who was 91, raised 7 kids. So shout to Nana in Maryland. Shout out to my partner in business for respecting me as a woman and respecting my mind. Thank you for inspiring me and putting that battery in my back and telling me that we could do this, that we didn't need to be managed. I didn't need to have anyone else, that we could do this together. He told me over and over and over till I believed it. And I might be the star out here, but he's the star in that office. And I couldn't accomplish anything you've seen me accomplish if it wasn't for Shakim having my back. See, he got the real conversations. They put on the pretty conversations in front of me. But they didn't know I was on the phone sometimes. Just listening, getting the real. So how can she remain humble after all these years? Because I know what people really say when Queen Latifah's not on the phone. I could keep my feet on solid ground and know who I am because I have real people around me, like Shakim, like LB, who love me. They smack my hand when I do bad things and they pat me on the back when I do well. And I appreciate that. I want to give a shout out to Boogie Down Productions, KRS-One, Miss Melody. Shout to Public Enemy. I want to give a shout out to MC Light. These are some of the people, the rappers who, and their camps who taught us what to do on the road as teenagers, not really knowing what to do. They showed us the game. They showed us the business. They showed us that we were the ones who would get 3 minutes on stage and that they would get the production. So we had a lot of work to do. But they showed us that we could do it. MC Light inspired me because she was the first rapper that I saw speak the way she did. So I'm surprised and also grateful that she gave me a shout out. She deserved that award, very much so. Just like a test I crammed to understand you. Who writes that? Songs like Cappuccino, Poor George, and things like that. I want to give much respect to Diane Carroll. Claudine was one of my favorite movies growing up. Many of you may know her for Julia. I knew her for Claudine. I knew that she was a black woman who sounded and spoke eloquently like my mother, who was beautiful like my mother. Even though she was impoverished at the time. I knew that there were people trying to separate her and this man from having a relationship. Had to hide the toaster, hide the TV. What a way to be, to live in a place where in order to get some assistance, you can't be with the person that you love. That you need to be a single parent. That's backwards ass. Excuse my language. When I got some money in my pocket, I did what everybody does. They take trips to Europe, because that's what you're supposed to do, right? And I wanted to go. First, I went to Italy. I went to Florence. I hired a guide. I went to Vatican City. Went to Rome. I saw all these things that were 2,000 years old, 3,000 years old. Wow. I was told all about these things. They were amazing, and how they were curated, and people would conquer and bring back the best and take the best in here and create this and these beautiful structures and artwork. I was very impressed. And then I went to Greece. And then I saw things, that were like 5,000 years old and 7,000 years old. And I saw incredible architecture. And again, I hired a one-on-one guide to take me around and explain things to me. I was so extremely impressed. It made me want to come home and collect more of my own artists here in America. But then I went to Egypt. I went to Africa, where things were 7,000, 10,000, 12,000 years old, and possibly older. And I said, wait a minute, that outfit that guy was wearing in Greece looks a lot like this outfit that this soldier was wearing here. And those arches that I saw in Greece and Italy, they look a lot like that building there. You see, it came from here. Black girl magic. Yeah, they was making some black girl magic back then. Black excellence. Yeah, we made some black excellence. And it wasn't just at the top of Africa. It was where you get a little browner as you keep going down. I learned about Hatshepsut, a female pharaoh. Anyway, my mother taught us to give back, and that's why we're here. Because everything we learned, we shared. Our job was the reason we opened up a management company was because our friends were in terrible record deals. They were getting taken advantage of. We all had bad deals, but they had terrible ones. And we were able to get them out of those record deals and get them much better deals. And that's why a lot of the rappers came to our company, because they saw the success we had with our own friends and decided they wanted to have that opportunity as well. We did our best to do a great job for them. We let them share in their business. It was our job to manage them, to do business for them, to act on their behalf. But if they wanted to sit in every meeting and be on every phone call and learn about their business, they were more than welcome to. And many took advantage of that. And many just decided, hey, I'm going to sing and I'm going to rap and do my thing and work on that. And that was fine too. But we gave it back. The doors stayed open. When we saw Will, one of our boys, get a TV show, we said, well, Will can do it. Well, we can do it. Thank you, Will, for doing that, because you inspired us and you've helped us all along the way. But we were able to go out and create Living Single. And Living Single let other people know that they could do it. From crossing over to rap and to film, the people at our agency told my partner, Sheila, that I could never be an A-list artist. Wrong thing to tell him. He was determined to make sure I became an A-list actress. And there are times that you have to walk away from things as well. And there are times that you will have to stand alone. So I'm going to speak to all of you students out here and let you know that you can be whatever you want to be if you put your mind to it and you work hard for it, and you will have to work hard for it. But just understand that there will be times when you will have to stand alone. There will be no one else that will believe in your dream. They will think you are out of your mind and think you can accomplish it. There are plenty of people who told us we could never be where we are today. A principal told Shakem he would amount to nothing. But we don't believe those people. And you have to be strong and be courageous. And just know that if you believe in it, it's going to happen. Don't give up. Do not give up. Do not quit. Fight for it. Fight. 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 I get in the backyard sometimes and I scream, fight! 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 That's me fighting for my life. Fighting against drugs and alcohol. Fighting against mental illness. Fighting against racism, sexism, all of it. You're going to have to fight. So, I'm going to wrap it up. Some people carry around other quotes in their wallets. But I carry around one that says, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you very much.
Give it up for the Queen. Give it up for Queen Latifah. No, you all been very patient, though. We're going to move right to the music. I'm just going to say a quick word, which is to say this. As the mighty Dells from Chicago would put it, oh, what a night. So much love, so much joy, so much eloquence. Grand exemplars of excellence and style. Young folk, I want to speak directly to you. Did you notice the humility? Did you notice their mastery of the subject matter, but also connecting their vision to execution? Did you notice that this living legend, this intellectual giant, this cultural icon, for 50 years has been a long-distance runner and brings us together every year? Give it up for this brother, my dear brother, Skip Gates. That's right. From Gut Bucket, West Virginia to Harvard University, my brother Skip Gates. We love him. We love him. People always ask me, how can you be a revolutionary and spend so much time with Skip Gates? He's just a progressive. I said, let me tell you something. The love always cuts deeper than politics. And we overlap in so many ways. I'll take a bullet for this brother. And Sister Mary all knows his companion. I want to salute Brother President Larry Bacow. His principled commitment to diversity is real and genuine. Let's give it up to this brother. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. He's serious. He's got a hatred of racism in all of its various forms. He comes from the rich prophetic tradition of our Jewish brothers and sisters and recognizes the ways in which that leads him to keep track of the humanity of black and white and red and Jewish and Muslim and whatever. That's what the best of Harvard is all about. Give it up for this brother. And we salute Sister Adele. Oh, yes, compel. Oh, salute our dear sister. And then old brother Glenn, oh, every 3 months we get a chance to spend time together pushing each other. He said, what you spending time with Bernie Sanders for? I said, I think he's right. What you spending time for those other Democrats for? I love that brother when he's right, when he's wrong, and when the money's flowing, it's flowing from his heart. Give it up to Brother Glenn. See, I'm from California, so I've never been a Boston Celtic fan, even though we gave you Bill Russell from San Francisco. But I love him anyway. Love him anyway. And to have Marion Kielsen, is she still there? Yes, she is. To have Orlando and Anita. To have Mercedes and David. To have Connie and to have Preston and Precious Son. My God. And to see their pictures. See, I arrived here 50 years ago, and to think that this legacy is still going on. I want to remind us, given the standing alone represented, because when you all look at these brothers and sisters, the chocolate ones, 400 years of being hated, and look at all the love you're still dishing out. 400 years of being terrorized. Look at all the freedom you're still unleashing on the world. 400 years of being traumatized. Look at how you heal us. That's the tradition of W.B. Du Bois. Yes, we got a lot of gangster activity in the White House. But I believe in Christian hatred. Well, I hate the sin and still try to love the sinner. That's what I learned in Vacation Bible School. When you look at these brothers and sisters, their lives are enacting so much of the best of the afterlives of their mothers and fathers and grandfathers and grandmothers and aunts and teachers and coaches and jazz and blues and hip-hop and rhythm and blues teachers. That's what you're looking at when you're looking at these folk. You're looking at a great tradition of a great people. Let's just be honest about it. Goes beyond the individual, goes beyond the person, but we choose to do that. Because there's a history of black gangsters and black thugs too. They chose something else, but they could change too. Because all of us got a little gangster in us. I know I do. I'm just speaking for myself. But young folk, before we go, ending with the music, echoing that last chapter of W. Du Bois' Souls of Black Folk, published in 1903, April 18th, 1903, 35 years old. Especially to the younger generation. I'm thinking especially of precious Ayana, who's the precious child of Brandon and Shaggy, who just turned the corner. I got a smile on my face. She's part of that same tradition of building on the best of what has come before. But Du Bois did stand alone in February 1942 with the executive order of 9066, where FDR, the liberal president, chose to bring our Japanese brothers and sisters in internment camps, 10 of them, 120,000. Du Bois was the only black spokesman who stood with Norman Thomas and John Dewey and Reinhold Niebuhr, who wrote what you just read. That's Reinhold Niebuhr, very close to Preston Williams. Du Bois stood alone, not in the spirit of self-righteousness. He could agree to disagree. All of us agreed to disagree. We had a wonderful dialogue on divestment this past semester. We agree to disagree. We jazz-like. We're lifting our voices. We're not looking for unanimity. We're looking for respectful dialogue with one another, being that we're attempting to engage in a quest for truth. Du Bois had a teacher named William James who invited him to the philosophy club that excluded black folk. Same department our dear brother Tommy Shelby now teaches. And William James did not have an A.B., didn't have a M.A., he didn't have a Ph.D., but he was the greatest philosopher of his day. He was the most adorable. The tender man. He was alluring, but he was given an honorary degree at Harvard, June the 24th, 1903, just a few weeks after Du Bois's text was published. And he had just written Du Bois and said, as my student, I want the world to know that your voice is now on the international stage. He wrote that to his brother, the great Henry James, one of the finest of all literary artists. But when, in fact, he received the honorary degree, William James walks up to the microphone. He says, I want to give a talk entitled The True Harvard. And he says, what Harvard is about is not valorizing public idols or vulgar ends. It's not just about success. It's about greatness. Yes, we applaud your success, no doubt. But greatness is something else. And that's what we're accenting tonight. What you use your success for. And that's precisely what William James said. He said, the thoughts and exemplary deeds are like seeds in Harvard as a botanical garden that grows. That's what our commitment to Veritas is about. That's what you all represent. And the condition of truth is always to allow suffering to speak. That's what greatness is. Du Bois was not always right either. He was wrong on a number of issues, on the Soviet Union, for example. But what we accent tonight is the way in which the true Harvard is the Harvard that mustered the courage in the souls of the students, of young people who stand not just for folk who look like you, but for Japanese, for Mexicans, for Muslims, for Jews, for Dalits, for Roman, Gypsies, Dalits, across the board. That's what true greatness is. And that
is what is so magnificent about the spirit of this place right now in Sanders Theater. And you're going to hear a little bit more of it with the Kuumba singers, because they're going to take us higher just before we leave. Let us salute the Kuumba singers. Let us salute the magnificent recipients. Let us salute our three leaders here. Let's go out with some music. Riding high with a Palestinian Jew named Jesus. Riding high with Jesus. Love, service to others, focusing on the least of these.
Give it up for Cornel West. Give it up for Cornel West.
Ride on,
up for the Kumba Singers. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good night. We'll see you next year.